I wanted to wrap up our discussion of working with audio in Premiere with a few finishing touches, a few tips and tricks to kind of put that little extra polish on your finished project. You've heard the phrase, silence is golden. But in video production, I like to think of silence as deafening. In fact, if you have a gap in the audio in your project, your viewers are going to actually wonder if something has happened to your show. Did something drop out? Did I lose my audio? Did my computer quit? Did my internet drop out? Whatever. But silence draws attention to itself. Dead silence draws attention to itself. Let me show you. I've opened up a little gap in our interview clips here in the timeline, this little space right here between interview clips on either side. And as we play through it, I want you to notice, actually, in fact, you can kind of close your eyes and listen and see what you think.
Ava said no, we needed to have a back seat.
Because we need a place.
There's a real obvious break in the audio. Now we can hear the music in the background, but we're losing some ambiance with that, with the gap in the audio. So one of the things that we can do to bridge that gap is to fill it with what we call room sound. Room sound is that ambient, atmospheric sound that's all around us when there's nothing else happening. So if I stop talking and you just listened for a moment, you would hear some birds chirping in the trees, you might hear the rustle of wind, you might hear the rooster next door. But that's room sound. That's the ambient, underlying sound under everything. And what we want to do in our video here, in this particular case, is add room sound to bridge any gaps in the actual audio, any breaks in the audio. Well, where do you get room sound? What I recommend is that when you're out on location recording, that you take 30 to 60 seconds of just nothing. You film nothing. Hold your camera or your phone or your digital audio recorder just up in the air, press record. Don't talk, don't do anything else. Just let it record for 30 to 60 seconds. And you've got a room sound clip. Well, in this case, I didn't do that specifically. I didn't record something called room sound, but what I do have is a lot of B-roll. And B-roll, as you recall, is alternative footage. It's not the main footage, which is our interview footage here with Chuck and Ava. But it's just other alternative shots around, the event here. So I found a clip here of the judge writing on the clipboard. This was a subclip that I'd made earlier. And if we've got it loaded up in the source monitor window, if I click on the audio icon here, you'll see that the waveform for this clip it's pretty flat. It's just kind of a low level murmuration, if you will. There's no spikes, there's no obvious identifiable sounds. And in fact, if we play through this, you'll see it is just background sound. Nothing to it. Okay, but it's filler, and it will actually help to fill the gaps as, for example, as we've opened up in the timeline. Well, how do I get this into my show? First of all, I need a place to put it, and normally I would put this below my soundtrack audio. So my soundtrack, as you recall, my music was in Audio 3. I've actually added a fourth audio track, and the way you would do that if you need to is to go up to the Sequence menu and choose Add Tracks from there. And it'll bring up a dialog box. You can add any number of tracks that you need. So I've added a new audio track below Audio 3. I want to make sure that my audio source patching is enabled for Audio 4. So I'm going to click the little button down here to the left of Audio 4, make sure that's turned on. And clicking on the drag audio only, I'm going to drag this room sound clip into my timeline. Now let's put it here in this gap. I'm going to actually run it under the whole thing eventually, but let's just put it here in this gap so that we can kind of hear the level and see how well it's going to work, volume wise, to fill those gaps. We don't want it to be really soft. We don't want it to be really loud. We just kind of want it to be that even continuation of background sound between clips here. So let's play through this gap and see how that sounds.
Back seat.
Because we need a place for the kids.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Actually, let me bring the volume up just a tiny little bit and see if that makes a difference. I don't want it to compete with our interview, but let's see how it sounds.
Needed to have a back seat.
Because we need a place for the kids.
Now let me turn it off. I'll mute that audio.
Because we need.
Can you tell the difference? Turn it back on.
Seat.
Because we need
Yeah, much, much better with a little bit of continuation of sound between those gaps. Obviously, this clip was not long enough to run the full length of our show. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate it and replicate it out for the length of the show. It's a generic enough piece of audio that there are no identifiable things like, somebody talking or an engine sound or a siren or anything like that that's going to be identifiable as a repeated element. So frankly, probably nobody would ever notice that it's been duplicated when they're hearing it. The easy, quick way to duplicate this is to use the selection tool. I'm going to hold down my Option key on the Mac or Alt on Windows. I'm going to click on that clip and drag it to the right. And clicking and dragging with the Alt or Option key down duplicates your media and allows me to drag it at the same time. And I'm just going to duplicate it enough times to get it out near the end of the clip. And I don't really need it for that part of the show after Chuck stops talking. And we just kind of cut away to the car driving down 17-mile drive and that sort of thing. So let's kind of find where he stops talking here.
Sight and red is just such a striking combination, and the car was in exceptional condition.
Okay, so Chuck stops talking about there. So really I want to fade out the room sound about there as well. In fact, we can even lose that last clip because there is no gap in the room noise, with Chuck's interview. There's room sound in their interview clip. So I can just kind of fade this out right about here by using our keyframing technique that we saw earlier. Choose the pen tool, P for pen, click to set a keyframe point on the audio volume line, click to set a second one, and drag it down, and that's going to fade out that room sound. In fact, if we solo that track, so in other words, we're muting everything else, you'll hear that this track will just fade out. There's our room sound, and it's just going to fade out gradually. So there's no, all of a sudden, why does it sound different? If we play everything back again, you probably won't even notice that it's gone, that it fades away.
With the 280 SL that we have, the anthracite and red is just such a striking combination, and the car was in exceptional condition.
There we go. So the point is to make it in the background, not obvious, not draw attention to itself, and that's what we've done. And it will fill those gaps. So as we play through that earlier part of the interview where there was a gap in the audio, let's listen to that.
Needed to have a back seat.
because we need a place for the kids to sit.
You would never know there was a gap there. So that's room sound. And try to remember when you're out filming to record, to capture at least 30 to 60 seconds of room sound. I was fortunate in this case that I had enough B-roll that I could find some good low-level room sound. But try to remember, put it on a checklist or something to record 30 to 60 seconds of room sound when you're on location. That will save you the trouble of trying to extract it from something else that it wasn't intended for.